sometimes can be issues. And this time they were. It happens. Glad we made it. Credit to the persistence of one Emil Kadlec for making
it's a wonderful world, isn't it?
Assuming we will be up momentarily. Have plenty of things to run through today, so might be a little abbreviated. Hope everyone stuck around. Almost there. Not sure if some of you out there can see that we're live or see the video yet. We can't see the video, or I can't, but it does indicate we'll be about to go live. So if you're sitting there and seeing this and waiting patiently, it's only because we can't see this and we're waiting patiently, and should be up any minute now. And we'll start taking your questions, play some either ors, all kinds of fun stuff planned today and going forward. So stay tuned.
At least on the studio, it says everything's good, so hopefully it'll pop up.
Yeah, we show the sidebar that we are about to broadcast or fixing to broadcast or close to. There we go. We are live now.
Great.
So there we have it, everybody. Sorry for the delay. We'll let everyone who is trying to catch up get caught up here, and as we get ready. So here, throw something in the chat here. We have some. I'm Bob Harris. He's Emil Kadlec. We have some plans for today with some either/or selections that we think will be fun. Some guys with very similar ADPs. As the queue builds up, we'll give everyone a minute here. Hope you're getting your notifications. If you want to make sure you get all your notifications, just hit the subscribe button right below Emil Kadlec and make sure you are good to go. In the meantime, the website's up and running as always. FootballDiehards.com is where you'll find all our work and all our rankings and all our tools and all that kind of fun stuff, including our magazines, the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast 31st edition, the 20th anniversary Football Diehards magazine, also available for your reading pleasure. Digital formats as well if you subscribe online. You can also have them sent first-class mail. Get there in very short order. Let's see, the tweet has gone out, so if you have any questions, just chip it in the chat, and we'll happily answer them as we go along. We may intersperse them in with some of our other conversation. In case you missed it, we're going to do some either/ors today, some guys with similar ADPs, and not so much to, just tell you either/or who we like, but also to, give you a little insight into how we make these decisions and how we make the close calls. So it's always kind of interesting. And a little bit of news today, so a few newsy items. Jarrett Stidham, the quarterback competition in New England has been lackluster. Cam Newton, a little behind the eight ball as you would expect, trying to get up to speed, learning the offense. And Jarrett Stidham has kind of been looking okay until yesterday. He threw a bunch of interceptions. And last night they took him to the hospital. Had his upper leg, they're calling it, tested as a hip issue. NFL media is reporting that it'll be a couple of weeks before he's back up to full speed. So maybe that gives Cam Newton the edge he finally needed. There was some talk of a platoon there, which is what's more horrifying than a quarterback platoon. When you have more than one quarterback, you don't have any, as the old saying goes. So if anyone's got any questions, go ahead and chime in with them now. In the meantime, Emil and I will crank up some either/or discussions. And I'll throw these out there if you have any comments on them as we get into them. We'd be interested to hear. We'll start with the quarterback situation. We'll start with, let's say, Carson Wentz and Josh Allen, Emil. They're going fairly evenly, almost surprisingly so, I guess, for me. I mean, I think for me, it seems like Josh Allen's been the guy that's everyone's been interested in up until it's this point. So, and I think the reason for that is because the rushing floor, right? The perceived rushing floor. Could it be that the increased buzz surrounding Zach Moss and, a short yardage runner, kind of a Frank Gore guy who looks like he might be the young, more powerful version of Frank Gore right now, is getting a little buzz, and we're worried that maybe Allen isn't going to get those same goal line carries. So this is tightened up a little bit.
Yeah, I think you just start drafting, and there's as we've talked many a time, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are available between 8 and 14. And maybe people are just going, yeah, I don't really need to take this guy. I can take a Tom Brady or somebody else. And so his value's kind of slipped a little. Last year, he finished 10th fantasy-wise at quarterback. He had 9 rushing touchdowns. Do you really think he's going to repeat that? Is there going to be some regression? And you look at Wentz. Wentz finished 8th last year in fantasy quarterbacks. And had a horrible year. The remembrance was, it was horrible. And he lost all his receivers. Everybody was hurt. Yet he finished 8th. So you can get Wentz right now as the 12th quarterback, ranked, and his ADP is in the 9th round, and he could easily finish in the top 8 again.
Right. You talk about those injuries, and I mean, I think the only healthy wide receiver left at one point was basically Nelson Aguilar, who was struggling. Miles Sanders became the playmaker both in the running game and the passing game, averaged 10 yards a catch, which was pretty damn good, right, for his rookie season for a running back. But despite all the injuries, Wentz still threw for over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns. And I think, it kind of highlights how solid his floor is when he's healthy. I think that's a fair point, right? So in Allen's case, I think a lot of that floor has been dependent on the rushing ability. So if you're afraid that someone's going to come in and usurp some of that, that is a concern, and I think we are. Allen finished in the top 10 in fantasy points 7 times. He ranked in the top 15 in 11 of his 16 starts. So he was, quarterback 1 or very nearly that in every single game. But I do think if you're kind of getting to the tail end of the starters, for me, Wentz is a little more appealing at the moment. I think it is because we fear, or at least there's a possibility he loses some of that rushing equity that is one of the main reasons we've been drafting him the last 2 years. Big arm, doesn't always get the ball where it needs to be. They add Stephon Diggs. I think there's still some skepticism about how he'll, fit in with that skill set. So I think it's a fairly reasonable point. So we're taking, look, in most cases, guys, I'm a cheapskate. I want the cheaper option. If there are two players that are comparable, I want the way cheaper one. In this case, it's a little more complicated because we've tried to pick guys for this exercise today who are right next to each other in ADP. So we see Josh Allen, the 11th quarterback off. Carson was the 12th. In this case, I am taking the cheaper option. I feel like it's the safer option at that point. And I think you agree, right? Emil? Safer. Carson Wentz.
Yeah, Wentz, I like Wentz. He's had problems with being injured, but I just feel like he could have the higher ceiling of those two. And you're paying about the same. Your ADP is, like you said, we're looking at people close together. So I'm going to take Wentz. It's frustrating right now that Allen is that high, if I can say. I had him up at like the 8th quarterback recently. I've already moved him down to like the 11th or 12th. Given what we were talking about. So yeah, I would go with Wentz personally.
All right, well, let's look at a running back duo, and we'll go with some of the higher end plays right now, before we get in. I think all these are very interesting, some more so than others. Let's look at a running back situation where we have running back 8, Josh Jacobs, versus running back 9, Miles Sanders. They're both going virtually a dead heat in terms of draft capital. I shared this story yesterday because I thought it was interesting. I did the SiriusXM host draft, the fantasy radio host draft, and got Miles Sanders in the 2nd round, the 14th pick overall. And that seems like a little lower than he's been going. It's a little lower than his ADP. These guys are virtually tied, right? So they're both being viewed as, 1 point, first round, 10th pick of the first round. This would be a little easier, Emil, for me if this was a standard or half point versus full PPR. I might, still lean Josh Jacobs. I'll tell you, I think you could make an argument for Sanders either way as just being, having the higher end. And maybe what's better offense. Look, Josh Jacobs was very good last year, super effective with his carries. Wasn't as big a factor in the passing attack, and I think that's where the difference lies for me.
Yeah, it's another. These are tough. These are really, really tough. Sanders is very intriguing because he did so much last year at the end. And, of course, we talk about the fact that everybody was hurt. And Now, Jacobs got hurt a little bit at the end of the year. I have trouble with this one. I don't really see a guy. I'm flipping the coin on this one, really, depending on how I feel that day or how that draft's going.
And a PPR would be pretty easy for me. I would probably go Sanders, and we're assuming the injury isn't going to be a long-term issue. They're saying it's not. He was on the practice field today, not practicing, but in his uniform. So that's kind of an indication that it's not a serious issue. They have a lot of guys that are sitting out in Philadelphia today, this week. Zach Ertz just joined that crowd today with an unspecified upper body injury. And they're playing it very cautious with players. And by the way, Tyreek Hill's another one who is going to miss a few days. Andy Reid just said a short time ago before we started the stream that he would miss a few days, but the injury isn't serious. And I suspect that's the case with Miles Sanders, and they just want to be careful because they really plan to go into him with a true feature back, something we haven't seen them do a lot, mostly because I think they haven't had a Miles Sanders type player. The argument against that is they had him last year, and yet he was still in a platoon with Jordan Howard until Howard got hurt. So fair point, but nobody else there. Boston Scott's not going to cut into carries. I do love Josh Jacobs. The talk is he's going to get more targets. They want to get him more involved in the passing attack. It's a low bar to get him more involved because he wasn't very involved at all. But I think the thing that hits me is, his ability to break tackles. You mentioned he missed some times, 3 games at the end of the year with a shoulder injury. He was 13th in the league in carries and still finished second, I think, in broken tackles. He's just a powerhouse runner. So, if this was a standard league, maybe the equation's as simple as saying, look, I want Jacobs in a standard and Sanders in a PPR. Would that be reasonable for you, Emil?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, depending on where you are in your draft, let's say you're in the low first or top of the late second or whatever, you may just get one that falls to you and you take the guy who's left since it's so close. As
I did with Sanders in the draft I was talking about.
But if you're at 7 or 8 or 9 and you're thinking of pulling the trigger a little earlier, then you're going to have to make a decision.
Yeah, I think, and part of this is it seems like this offense is heading towards getting better. And this offense, the Raiders offense, they've obviously added a lot of pieces. But we kind of know that the Philadelphia offense is already there, especially when all the pieces are in place. So that's a little bit of a hair splitter, too, as you're sitting here trying to make these decisions. You can look at the overall offense and kind of try to get a feel for, sometimes it is as simple as saying, wow, these guys are very even, except one of them plays in a horrible offense. Talking to you, Le'Veon Bell. So I didn't put any Le'Veon Bell decisions in here. Let's look at a wide receiver one that I think is pretty interesting. And I think it's fair to say Cooper Kupp has been a bit of a darling. He's the favored guy. He's the first Rams wide receiver off the board. And for me, I would rather have Robert Woods because I like that consistency. It seems like we're getting that with Calvin Ridley in Atlanta, but maybe we are. So it's wide receiver 15 going in the 4th round, Cooper Kupp, 404, versus wide receiver 16 going a pick later, Calvin Ridley. So some of this may be roster construction for you as well. If you already have your top wide receiver, this may be a simple matter of, do I get Michael Thomas or a guy that I think is going to get a ton of targets and give me the super high floor? And maybe I take a chance with Cooper Kupp. But I'd say he's not as consistent, but he's really good. But the numbers were up and down last year. He had that huge game against Pittsburgh that I think came back the next week and got shut out completely, right? He had like a 200-yard game and then a shutout. And then late in the season, when the Rams started using some different personnel groupings that were getting Tyler Higbee more involved, Kupp's numbers really tailed off. And I think the only reason Calvin Ridley's numbers tailed off was because he was hurt. He missed the last 3 games.
What's interesting, Kupp ended up like 4th PPR receiver. Just looking at the last 13 to 17, he scored 18, 14, 16, 13, and 22. That's pretty good. But you look at Ridley in weeks 11 through 14, he scored 28 against Carolina, 22, 17, 18, and then he was out for 3 weeks. So, wow, he's got some potential this year. But, those are tough choices. Those tough choices to make.
Like a lot of it's interesting to see, I think I was looking through that Pittsburgh game for Kupp. last year. I mean, it was
Let me go look at that.
Maybe he came back and had none that game.
Yeah, he had 0 against Pittsburgh. He had 35 against Cincinnati,
So
a bye, and then he had a donut against Pittsburgh.
The 220-yard game against Cincinnati followed up by a 0 against Pittsburgh, and I remember that game. I don't know why I had the numbers wrong. But then after that, I mean, it was like lower single digits for the most part. He did come through, I mean, that's a reasonable floor. It just wasn't that high in production we saw earlier in the season. Week 3, 33 points, 26 points, 26 points. And he went down to 5 and 11. And that week-to-week consistency is something I'm looking for at this point in the draft. But again, it may depend on your roster construction. You may have gone, with a riskier play earlier. Maybe your first pick is you're thinking, he's kind of a volatile player. Maybe Tyreek Hill or somebody is your wide receiver 1, and you want a higher floor guy. Then it's understandable. Maybe Ridley would be that guy for you. And I think vice versa. Cooper Kupp has a little higher end, or a little higher ceiling to me as maybe the lead receiver in some periods. So that would
he definitely has a low floor. He's all over the place, but boy, he can have some big games. Kupp, that is.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think we'll see what the Rams' backfield situation plays out. But as long as that's in question, they lost Brandon Cooks, so you would think that would be working Kupp's favor to some degree. I would still rather have Robert Woods at an even cheaper price. I think he's going a few rounds later. That would probably be my preference over Kupp, but 404 is not – the middle of the fourth round for either of these guys is pretty fair value, and that's kind of why I picked them for this one. Here's another thing that maybe is a little bit similar in that you can – you're kind of wide receiver 22 versus wide receiver 23. We're going to go with Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen versus Terry McLaurin. And, the tough thing about this one is the quarterback situations for both are a little bit in flux, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
So, I mean, look, Tyrod Taylor, maybe it's easy to overlook him. And, hey, Graham, thanks for the question. We'll get to it momentarily. We'll kind of suss this one out. But I feel like Keenan Allen is that super huge floor guy. He's had 130-plus targets each of the last 3 years, 1,100 yards receiving, at least 6 touchdowns. I mean, I think we forget how good he is. And maybe a little bit of fear that, Phillip Rivers is gone. What are they going to do? Well, Tyrod Taylor, when he gets an extended chance to play in Buffalo, what did he do with Sammy Watkins there during a stretch? A 9-game stretch, Sammy Watkins was the best receiver in football by far. And Tyrod Taylor was throwing a pretty good deep ball, too. McLaurin is a huge target monster, I think, in Washington because I don't, a lot of buzz about Antonio Gibson coming on, but I'm not sure how much I'm going to trust that. McLaurin was the guy last year carrying this offense. But do we trust the Dwayne Haskins, or would you love to see Alex Smith actually be the 1 in a million who makes it back from this kind of injury?
God, I don't think I would hope that Alex Smith retires after he tinkers around here in the preseason. That YouTube that we were looking at scares me a lot. But, what's interesting about these two, Keenan Allen has an experienced quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. Even though he hasn't done a lot and he has limitations, he is an experienced quarterback. And McLaurin's got a young quarterback in his second year, so you kind of have to weigh that. Do you trust it? And McLaurin's ADP, it says 5th round. I think he's going before that. That guy he's probably going then. Every time I try and pick him, he's gone. So you're not getting him cheap. It's an interesting one. The veteran could end up, the veteran Keenan Allen could be the better pick here, but both are tempting.
But this might be a roster construction thing to me too. If you waited a little while, I've had this happen where I'll maybe go 2 running backs and a tight end, and then I'm looking at my first wide receiver, and I wanted just a solid floor guy. I've been going Keenan Allen in cases like that. And if I like my second receiver, maybe I'm more interested in Terry McLaurin at that point. So for some of the upside. So we have a couple questions we'll get to here. Graham Bach wants to know Ron Jones in the 9th and DeVante Adams in the 5th, or Chubb in the 3rd and Fuller in the 10th, full PPR, yardage bonus at 100 and 150. I'm guessing you're deciding on keepers based on the values, Graham. Maybe you could fill me in on that, but I'm going to assume it's that for now. I'm probably still going DeVante Adams in the 5th. I think that's great value for him if that's where you have him at as a keeper. And Ronald Jones, I mean, I think he's going to be the starter. He looks, Bruce Arians has said as much. And there are still other guys there. I would rather. I mean, DeVante Adams to me is the second-ranked wide receiver in football by easily after Michael Thomas. So I'm going to go that direction. Chubb in the third and Fuller in the 10th. Probably going to go with the value again. You need a running back here. Look, I wouldn't talk you out of Chubb. I think that's a fair price for him. Super good price for him. Not as fair as DeVante Adams in the 5th, but Chubb in the third is fair price. He's going to be splitting with Hunt though. Maybe you get him back. Can't keep two of the same position. So, or the two top 5 right guys. So in that case, I would go Adams and Fuller. Boy, can't keep the same position. I mean, that kind of throws a wrench in it. I guess I would go Chubb. Oh God, I mean, that's almost an impossible conundrum. You can't keep two in the same position or two top 5 round. So, I mean, you either have to go Jones and Fuller or Adams and
Chubb.
You can't because you can't go Adams he's a fit, so you can't go Adams. So I don't know. You only have one choice here, according to your rules, Graham. I read right. If you could only keep two of the same position or two top 5 round guys,
He says you can't keep two of the same position.
So it's leaving one choice, as far as I can see, based on the rules. Am I seeing that wrong, Emil?
He says you can't keep two of the same position.
Okay, Adams
Or
and
top
Jones,
5.
right? Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
I mean, that's like your only choice.
You're right.
Because you can't keep two at the same position. So that would be my choice as well, because I'd want to keep Adams. And I think you can look. This looks like I'm guessing this is a 12-man. I think you'll at least get a reasonable running back, given that these rules I think they're designed to force your hand a little bit, right? To throw back some. Hey, Don. Brittany Coleman wants to know, in an upcoming PPR 12-man league, I just found out I have number 6. Should I take a Kamara potentially, or Michael Thomas, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Also curious, any relation with Bob and Chris Harris? No, I'm not related to Chris Harris. We are not even distant cousins, it turns out. But he's a great guy and does great work. Big fan of his. So Kamara. So look, the way that I've seen these guys coming off basically is Kamara, Thomas, and Edwards-Helaire. I'll just double check the ADP right here, but that seems to be the direction they're going.
Number 6, you could get Kamara. I would be tempted to go with Thomas at that point and get the secure PPR guy.
Yeah, look, I think this is just a matter of personal preference to me. I think they're all fair in that range. I would probably go Kamara if he was available first, but I think current ADP has Kamara going off 3rd ahead of Ezekiel Elliott this week. That's a little skewed. So I would say it's like Kamara and Dalvin Cook are basically 3A, 4, kind of in that range. Michael Thomas is coming off next, followed by Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you're thinking as you're looking forward in this draft how you want to build your roster, if running backs are going heavy in these drafts as they are, I might want to get that running back in the first round. I generally don't pick Thomas till a little bit later. In the draft, I mean, look, if Thomas is there with the 7th pick, I'm getting him. But I think I'm going like Cook, Kamara, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then probably starting to look at the wide receiver for me. So all 3 viable in that spot. I'm going to lean slightly to Kamara in this one. I would probably just go Kamara, Thomas, Harris in that or Harris. I'm Harris. Edwards-Helaire in that order on this one, Brittany, for me. Emil, your final call?
Yeah, well, I guess if Kamara's there in the 6th pick, I'd take him. I don't think he'll be there, so I think your choice is going to be Thomas and Helaire. And then it's very difficult because we talk about somebody with experience that we know is reliable. And, so if you take Thomas, then you're looping around to the 7th pick in the 2nd round. Can you get a decent running back there that you want that'll work well? And that's the important thing when I talk a lot about is don't just look at the first round. Look what's going to happen in the 2nd and the 3rd. And then if you feel comfortable with those 2 or 3 players that it meets your needs, then that helps you make that decision. If you don't like any of the running backs in the 2nd, you really need one of those top 4 or 5 running backs, then your decision's made for you.
And Donnie didn't catch the early part of this chat where we spent about 10 minutes talking about Sanders, but yes, we agree. He's a very good pick. And I see Thomas going anywhere from, for me, about that 5th pick. I don't see him going earlier than that. I've seen him in one draft go earlier than that. And I mean, probably out of 50 plus drafts that I've been in. So, it's not crazy. Look, if you pick Thomas first overall in a PPR league, it's probably the safest play out there. Not, I wouldn't do it, but, Christian McCaffrey's pretty safe play too. Saquon Barkley seems like a reasonably good play. But, you get into that third pick, I can see why you might want to get there if you're leaning Thomas. Very safe play. So, yeah, I'm not actually keeping count on, so I say 50 because I'm just guessing. Might be more, might be less. But somewhere in that range. All right, let's get to another one of the either-or situations here. Let's look at a tight end situation. And so I blame Mike Dempsey for this one, my co-host on Sirius, who began talking. If you go back in Twitter and you check his tweets, he started tweeting that basically Hayden Hurst would be a better play than Austin Hooper. That Hurst would be the top finisher easily over Hooper at tight end, and he's doubled down on that. He's been drafting like crazy, and so is the rest of the world. So we now have Evan Engram going off as tight end 7, Hayden Hurst going off as tight end 8. The trade-off to me is unable to stay on the field versus unproven. Right? Hayden Hurst has the draft stock. Clearly, he was a first-round pick of the Ravens. Just never saw him that much on the field. He wasn't as good a fit as Mark Andrews, a very good tight end. In Atlanta, we had Austin Hooper, who had built a strong connection with Matt Ryan, which Hurst is working on. But mostly, we're buying into that Dirk Cutter tight end share, which has been the targets have been heavy ever since. Whether he's been offensive coordinator or head coach, wherever he goes, he throws to the tight end a hell of a lot. Engram, huge production when he's on the field, right? If he's getting targets, he's going to be very productive. Size, speed, running down the middle, he's pretty much unstoppable. He just struggles to stay on the field. Which would be your pick, Emil?
Really excellent. Well put. Exactly. Injury over experience. I'd probably go with Hurst. I think I can get him a little later than the 8th pick. But if the situation's just right, where you're in a position where I'd like to take Engram as my number 2 tight end, which means a deep league, and I get lucky and he lasts a while, I'm worried that he's never going to be healthy. It's been enough time that it worries me. But, man, the potential's there. But do you want potential? And, of course, Hurst is potential, too, because he haven't shown it. These are very tough. I guess I'd have to go with Hurst.
Interesting numbers here. If Engram was one of just 6 players who appeared in at least 8 games and were targeted at least 6 times in all of their games, right? In those games, he finished as a top 10 tight end 5 of the 8 games. He ranked outside the top 10 just twice. So as long as he's on the field, it's huge upside. It's almost locked in, and that is the question: do we trust it? In Hayden Hurst's case, you're definitely buying into. Basically, you're drafting Dirk Cutter. His offenses have ranged 18% to 21% target share for tight ends over the past 5 seasons. Austin Hooper, the previous tight end, saw 97 targets last season, which, I think is a fairly high floor for Hurst. He was only targeted 62 times as a Raven. So, I don't know. I think Hurst is a little more of a gamble, but they're both kind of gambles at this point. So, I'll just say this. I'm not drafting tight ends in this range. If I'm not getting one of the top 3 early in the draft, I'm waiting until late, and I'm starting to draft I don't want to call them flyers because they're not. We'll talk about some of them later, but the Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki's, TJ Hawkinson's. I'll take a shot there because they're so cheap. And I just feel like maybe I'm getting better value if I draft somebody else. Well, I know Donnie likes Tyler Higbee. I know you like him as well. We'll get to him at some point.
Well, that's an excellent point, Bob. I love that idea because there are some guys down there. Even Doyle, you can get super late. Noah, you just mentioned a lot that you can get a lot later. And maybe have, just as good a chance as Hurst, being a top 10 overall finisher this year in fantasy points. At the tight end position.
Your investment is so slim that you can just move on and try another one of those guys that's still sitting around. There's guys available that are likely to be available on waiver wires. I don't see him drafted too much. Irv Smith Jr., who has a lot of upside. There's a ton of those guys, and maybe even Gerald Everett, the guy who might cut into your guys, Tyler Higbee's. Yeah. Let's go back and look at another running back situation. and I think this one's interesting, pretty polarizing player for the most part in Leonard Fournette, who is going off as running back 20 against Melvin Gordon, who is going off as running back 21. 309 versus 401. Look, I think it's safe to say when you're drafting Leonard Fournette, you're drafting clear path to workload. We don't know what that is with Melvin Gordon. If you haven't been to the website or checked the latest news and notes from the camp, Vic Fangio basically saying yesterday he doesn't know if he'll have a guy who's actually a starter. The workload is going to be shared so much between Gordon and Philip Lindsay that, whoever the starter is isn't really going to matter. They're going to keep sharing. So that might just be happy talk or coach speak or whatever you want to call it. I do think Melvin Gordon's a lot better player than Philip Lindsay. I know he's coming off 2,000-yard seasons, etc. But Gordon is just is a better between the tackles kind of runner. One of the things about Lindsay, and I know Mike Clay wrote about this last year at one point, he gets tons of yards, before contact. Like I think last year was the most in the league, or one of the top five for sure in the league. And so he needs the good blocking. He does take advantage of the good blocking. Maybe Melvin Gordon not so much. Look, he hasn't been a huge yards per carry guy, but he's great near the goal line, great in the red zone. But for me, this question really is more about Leonard Fournette. And I know there's a lot of people who feel like the Jaguars don't like him. They're looking to get rid of him. Again, my co-host Mike Dempsey on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio covers the Jaguars on a daily basis. He thinks that's silly talk. Look, clearly they don't like him. Nobody's arguing that, right? There was trade talk. They tried to trade him before the draft. It didn't happen. So now they have him on the last year of a contract. He has something to play for wherever he's going, right? It's not like he wants to give up and say, oh, look, everybody, I'm not going to try hard. I'm on a contract here, and this team doesn't like me. And the Jaguars have no reason not to run the wheels off him because he's in the final year of a contract. They can decide what they're going to do, move on, whatever. So I do think Leonard Fournette is the clear path to workload guy. The question is what is he going to do with that workload, Emil? Is he going to score more than 3 touchdowns?
Yeah, that's and he also caught 76 balls last year. I'm just glancing at the data. I don't think he caught any receiving touchdowns. Yeah, that's a real issue. If I'm going to pick one of these two guys, I'm going to take Fournette over Melvin Gordon. And I guess I'm a little emotional about that. He's already injured. Apologize. I've got a 5-pound Morkie dog that's decided he wants to scream, and boy, can he scream. I think Fournette's probably the pick, and let's just hope he can score more than 3 total touchdowns. I don't know if he's going to get 100 targets receiving this year, so that worries me. But here's Gordon. He's already got a rib injury in preseason, and he's missed a lot of games. I'm just done with him. Boy, that's emotional. I apologize, but I'm done with Gordon. Down the cheat sheet he goes.
I'm not done with him yet, but I think I like Gordon. I know Don is not sold on Fournette in Jacksonville. You don't have to be sold on him in Jacksonville. He's there, and they don't have anybody better than him right now. So, that's my pick
Armstead as a handcuff, and you can get that guy fairly late, just in case.
Don's a little worried about the rookies this year with no exhibition games and no early rookie practice. This is a concern for everybody. We're seeing some of the guys you mentioned, Don, Antonio Gibson, Washington, Bowden in Oakland. I'm not as keen on Bowden. It sounds like a more varied role, but the recent reporting out of Washington has been super positive on Gibson, that they're just getting him tons of balls. His ADP's already climbed up to the 7th round though, so it's starting to get to the point where I'm getting a little hinky until I understand the role. So I think Adrian Peterson is going to start there. Bryce Love's starting to get some love, so no pun intended, as the running back too. Gibson is the guy though that's going to be on the field a lot, lining up in the slot. And we'll see how they use him in the backfield. But they're calling him a running back, and so maybe he will get some time. Doesn't have a ton of carries in college, but a great receiver, a big guy, physical player, very fast. So I like him as well. Not sure I like him at the price anymore.
Yeah.
So let's, there's a couple of tough wide receiver decisions that I find. The toughest one that I find, we're going to throw this out there. It's currently wide receivers 27 28 and 29. And it's three guys who are all going in right in the middle of the 6th round. And they change. They kind of vary from week to week who you have. But it's Marquise Brown versus AJ Green versus DeVante Parker. And I see at times Parker will rise up. Some talk yesterday by Brian Flores saying that he's now he considers him a self-motivator, a self-starter kind of guy, doesn't have to push any buttons to get him going. Clearly they pushed some buttons last year, and whatever buttons they pushed worked really well because Parker was a top 5 receiver down the stretch for a lot of points. So again, this one may come to roster construction for you. None of these guys is going to have to be your first receiver. So maybe it depends if you get a high floor guy. Maybe then you take a chance with DeVante Parker or Marquise Brown. And I say take a chance. I don't feel like I'm taking a chance with any of these guys at this price. I feel like I'm getting a bargains. AJ Green, to me, it's still capable of being AJ Green. You heard the early reports out of training camp. Granted, the hamstring's an issue. It sounds like they're just being cautious with that. And if the hamstring's a concern, then it should be a concern for like Tyreek Hill too. I guess you're not going to draft him either. So not as worried about the hamstring right now. So, and maybe that becomes a bigger thing. Marquise Brown, a lot of talk about how he's about to make a leap similar to what we saw from Lamar Jackson last year. The people who are saying this, the same people who said it about Lamar Jackson last year, they turned out to be pretty credible, right? So I think it's pretty interesting, pretty interesting way to look at it here. I think does have to do with roster construction. If I think I need a high floor guy, I'm probably going with AJ Green. Otherwise, I'll take my choice of Parker. And again, I'm not in enough leagues for Don, but I'm in a lot of leagues. And so that gives you the opportunity to experiment and kind of vary your shares and, spread it out a little bit. And so that's what I've done. I have a lot of shares of Parker. I have a lot of shares of Brown. I have a lot of shares of Green. If I could only pick one, it would depend on the roster construction. And I probably like Green and Parker over Marquise Brown. But, man, I want to have some shares of that offense with Lamar Jackson as well. I usually get them in the form of Mark Andrews, though, so that's sometimes a determining factor as well. It's not unusual for me to have Andrews in the 3rd, 4th round. So if I do that, that makes it an easier decision on Brown. Who do you like, Emil?
Wow, this is another tough one. I love this. This is a great quiz. I'd probably go Parker, and then maybe I'd back him up with Preston Williams late, just in case Preston comes on and becomes the number 1 receiver. I've gotten some small shares of Hollywood Brown just because I remember what the coaches said here. And I don't like the fact it's a running team and you've got a dominant tight end in the passing game. But I try to trust this coach. So I'm getting some shares of Brown, especially if I can get him in the right spot in the draft. He doesn't go too early. So far, I've taken no AJ Green. I'm still mad at him from last year. I'm drafting emotionally. And maybe before the September 10th rolls along, I'll get AJ Green in a league or two.
Yeah, I'd like to be, we're only half joking. I mean, it's impossible to be emotionless in drafts, but the more emotionless you are, the better you're able to divorce your emotions from your decisions, the better off you are without fail. And, we've already let them know, Bill. Sorry about the issues. They're aware of it. If you check on Twitter, you can yell at them, and maybe it'll hurry them up. But we are aware that it's not working, and they're working on it. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't actually have much to say over the technical matters. So for me, the emotion is I'm greedy. I want value. I think all 3 of those guys are great value. So I want some of all of them. That's my emotion. So Brittany Coleman wants to know if Christian Kirk, McCole Hardman, or Michael Pittman in Indianapolis are the guys we would favor. I would probably take Kirk there. Dami already jumped in on that and said he would do that as well. I agree. I think the more likely workload, look, DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a ton of targets. In the past, it's been Fitzgerald getting a ton of targets, and Fitzgerald will still get some. But I think we saw some upside from Christian Kirk last year that leads me to believe he can continue on. Hardman, the problem for me, I love him. I want a piece of that Chiefs offense. But I think once you get past the top guys at each position, you're taking your chances, even at wide receiver. He may get more targets, and maybe that's a progression we'll see this year. Just at this point, it seems between him, DeMarcus Robinson, there's probably going to be a Byron Pringle week, Yep. So it's just hard to determine what week those guys are going to come on. And maybe it would take an injury to Tyreek Hill for any of them most likely Hardman to get a serious run. So that makes it a little easier. I like Michael Pittman. I think the Colts are going to be run first. T.Y. Hilton is supposedly looking good. Paris Campbell's also there. But for me, Pittman is the different piece there. He's the big physical player. So that's for me, it's easy call. It's Christian Kirk. Deontay Johnson, he might blow up. I thought he kind of blew up last year. I think every receiver in Pittsburgh is in line, Don, to blow up because they threw for about 2,000 fewer yards than they did the year before without, Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, relying on Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph did not work out well. So I do think that and I think Washington is a guy, James Washington is a guy that's way overlooked that maybe shouldn't be, especially with Big Ben coming back. Do you use average value cheat sheets during an auction draft with ever-changing markets and over-underspending? Doesn't it vary wildly to draft and too much? So that's like the general assumption, and I kind of get that. It turns out, if you go to the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast magazine, Brad Cruz has an auction values cheat sheet in there. It has been dead on. Some of the guys the biggest issues I've had with it is guys going cheaper than his upper limit, which is okay. I'm willing to draft to his upper limit. I found it to be very accurate in the $200, as long as you're working with the $200 bankrolls. But it can be and so the thing about it, and you mentioned they vary wildly. They haven't varied wildly, but they do vary, and you can get into an emotional situation on any given player. If a certain number of guys want him, they're going to drive that bidding up. That's part of what makes an auction so great. And what I do in those cases is I stick with the values that Brad Cruz comes up with so I don't overspend and I don't get caught up in the emotion, right? And that's the thing about auctions. They're emotional. I have a problem. My name's Bob Harris. I have a problem. I'm a price enforcer. I don't like anyone getting anyone cheap, man. I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna bid players up, and I do it often to my detriment because I just can't stand seeing people getting a good deal. Damn it, I don't want you. I want them to spend their money. And in the past, it's cost me. This year, I went into my most recent one, the Kings Classic, determined not to overpay, and I think I did it. And I think I got a really solid team. Emil?
Yeah. Well, what also Brad talks about is, like he talked about putting out the third quarterback or kind of a level down a little bit, and that sets the price in this particular auction. And if it is significant lifter, 10, 20, 30%, then you can adjust where you're at. It's an initial condition, and it's a good initial condition, but it can change. And I like to just print my cheat sheet out with those values, and then as players go, you put these numbers in, and then I just start integrating to those numbers after a while because that's where players have been going, and that those values, the reestablished values, are being set.
Yeah, if you haven't done auctions, Donnie's mentioning this. If you haven't done auctions, the great thing about them, which is a little more work, it's a little more effort, it's a little tension. Also, you get a chance at every player. I mean, it doesn't matter what your draft position is. You can bid on every single player that you want, and so you don't lose out on guys. I think it's a ton of fun.
Yeah. By the way, we did that auction on the live video, and if you go to the video section, you can watch that auction, all 4 hours of it. And what's funny about it, we got to the last 2 picks of my picks, and there was still strategy. Should I put this guy first or that guy second? Do I bid 1 or 3 just to put it at the max? I was like, these are the last 2 picks of an auction draft, and we're still analyzing the strategy to try and maximize my roster. Crazy.
Right. So I had a couple goals going into that Kings Class draft. Not be the price enforcer, not overbid on any single player, and to leave the draft room with zero money, draining my bankroll completely. And it can be a bit of a challenge. I pulled it off, but it's not always easy. But you want to walk out of the room without any money on the table. So Unipoke, I hear you, man. It is dynamic. People do overspend. I mean, and look, if you're in a room full of inexperienced auction people, that's probably more likely to happen. You're more likely to have that wild variance. So it pays to know your room as well. Bill wants to know, in all his mock drafts, he waits for quarterback, and he keeps getting Josh Allen, always available late, but can't seem to draft him. Are you high or low on him? You missed it. We talked about it early in this video. The ADP right now, he's right there with Carson Wentz. There's a lot of guys I'd rather have in the same price range. There's a lot of guys I'd rather have later than Josh Allen. I think we're we're still paying for that high floor from the rushing game, from his rushing totals, and we talked about this. If you get a chance, Bill, go back and rewatch this video from the start. But the short version is with Zach Moss there, a capable goal line carrier. Maybe there's a little worry that Allen doesn't get the same rushing touchdown equity that he's had in the past, and maybe that devalues him a little bit. His ADP has dropped accordingly. I mean, I saw him start the season at about 7 or so in ADP, and now he's down, right outside the top 10. So you're getting a little better price on that.
Yeah, with one starting quarterback leagues, as we talk about, you've got Matthew Stafford, Daniel Jones. There's so many guys. We even talked about Baker Mayfield even later, who, with all that talent there, and maybe he's matured, maybe the coaching staff is going to help him this year. It's a lot of options you can get late if you don't feel comfortable taking Josh Allen.
Yeah, no worries, Bill. No need to apologize. Just letting you know you could play us back and get the whole version of that conversation, because we've dug into it pretty much in depth, did a comparison with he and Carson Wentz. That's one of the things we've been doing here. Let's see if we can get to another pairing of players. I threw out a trio last time. I feel like it was cheating. This one's pretty interesting. I think running back has been, we're all looking for those early running backs. First, let's get Donnie's question first. Why is Aaron Rodgers all of a sudden not considered a starting quarterback in fantasy football? Lives, you can get him 13, 14. You can't get him that low anymore, Don. If you look at current ADP, he's going higher than that. He's rising up. He's going to throw for 4,000 yards, and they clearly want to be a run-first team, but I'm kind of with you on this. I think he was a value for a little while. Now he's less of a value as the price rises. I think he's inside or close to the top 10 on Fantasy Calculator right now, somewhere in a reasonable range. But the ADP is climbing a little bit, and I think people are starting to realize, look, we overdid it. He's not horrible. He's still Aaron Rodgers. I think it's a valid point. I think we were getting some value on him earlier. Let me give a quick look here on ADP. Yeah, he's risen up. He's at quarterback 10 right now, 8th round. So it is changing a little bit. Not as much as maybe it should, but it wasn't a great year last year. Let's face it. They were run heavy. Aaron Jones scored all the touchdowns. DeVante Adams was hurt for 4 games, and none of the other guys stepped up. So I think that's part of the special. So let's look at these running backs. I call them wide receivers. Running back 28 is DeAndre Swift, and running back 29 is Ronald Jones. 509, 510. The reporting the last 2 days has kind of been that Kerryon Johnson has not gone away, people. He's still there. He's looking good. Also, though, DeAndre Swift has looked like a much better receiver in drills than they expected when they drafted him. So, look, he's a great playmaker. Ronald Jones, we've all know Bruce Arians has kind of planted the flag, says he'll open the season as the lead back there. There are other guys. They added LaShawn McCoy, whose ADP is irrationally high because he has an ADP right now. I think that makes him I'd need to see him make the roster before I got excited. Dario Ogunbowale would be of more interest to me at the moment as a receiving back, but we'll see. Keyshawn Vaughn to talk today that, maybe we'll try him as a kick returner. I think he returned 1 kick in college, right? So, I'm not sure. They're sending signals here. To be fair, Vaughn opened the summer on the reserve COVID-19 list. He's off it now, so maybe he'll get a little more run as we start seeing him on the practice field a little more. But Ronald Jones has gained weight. He's bulked up. Maybe this is his year. Emil, which of these guys would you feel confident drafting? And the answer is not neither.
Well, it's a difficult call. I thought Swift was going a little earlier than Jones, and so I liked getting Jones a little later, but it appears their ADP is almost the same. If I could get Jones a little later, if I think in my league he's going to fall one more round, then I'd wait on Jones and take him. And I'm cheating here because we're theorizing that they're in the same spot. I like the fact that Swift is looking good as a catching running back, because I think that'll really get him a little extra value as a rookie, that he'd be a viable 5th round pick. But I'm kind of leaning Jones if I can get him one round later.
Again, to be the broken record, this may come down to roster construction, because I think it's something you need to pay attention to either time. Are you open to having a little more? I think, to me, Jones is the slightly less risky play based on what we've heard from Bruce Arians. Look, there's some risk with any running back going in the 5th round. There's a reason they're not in the top 3 rounds. Those are your sure path or clear path to workload guys that you see in those first 3 rounds. And these guys are outside those rounds for that reason. There are questions about their workload. To me, just based on what Bruce Arians said, I'm a little more confident in Ronald Jones. Tom Brady seems to have taken a shine to him, talking to Rich Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times a week or so ago. That was his impression, that Brady felt really confident with him. And he did, he was like not a horrible receiver last year. They just didn't use him in that role as much. And we just don't know. Vaughn's a bit of a wild card there, as Kerryon Johnson is for Swift. I would probably take the slightly cheaper component here if I was looking for more workload. If I was looking for upside, it would probably be Swift. And that might be the case. Look, if you drafted 2 or 3 running backs already by the 5th round, which isn't like totally out of the question, so certainly not 2. And if you're me, maybe even 3, maybe you're still looking for a guy at that point. And DeAndre Swift would be the upside play. If you only went one running back early, thinking, man, I just need a guy that I'm pretty comfortable with the workload, maybe then you go with Ronald Jones. All right. There's a little bit of coming in. So we'll do one more. Well, Donnie, I don't know that he's still not 100%. You saw him in the picture with a knee brace. That doesn't mean he's hurt. It means he's wearing a knee brace. Tom Brady wears a knee brace too. Is he hurt? I mean, he's been hurt in the past. So TJ Hawkinson is not 100%. Or so he claimed. Let's do one more here before we call it a day. We did start a little late. Sorry if you missed the beginning of this, or we run a little behind. Had some technical issues. We got it figured out, and it just took a little time. But we'll be back again tomorrow. Again, we're doing these today is Friday.
Yay! It's Friday.
So we'll be back Monday. It'll be a Monday. We're doing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're doing Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Hope that gets you in a little bit or works with your schedule. And if you have some suggestions, leave them in the comment. If there are times that you think are better or maybe some adjustments. I mean, we're not going to adjust just for no reason, but if a lot of people say, wow, these times are better for me, we would consider some other times. I mean, we have a little bit of flexibility within our schedule. So we'll do one more here, Emil, before we go, and then we'll throw out all the website information. By the way, if you want to make sure you don't miss any of these videos, hit the subscribe button right under Emil, and you'll get notifications in your phone or other device. We also send out emails, so subscribe to the website. I'll talk about that in a second. So this is one that's been befuddling me. Deebo Samuel, we keep hearing Kyle Shanahan, who also told us yesterday he's going to be more secretive than ever before. With for some reason, is telling us openly that yes, Deebo Samuel is going to play Week 1. Okay. Deebo Samuel had a suffered a Jones fracture the last couple of weeks of June, and had surgery that last week of June. The 10 to 16 week timetable was kind of the suggestion at the time. 10 weeks puts them at about Week 1. 16 weeks puts him maybe opening the season on pup, and then he would have a chance to come back after Week 6. They have a 3-week window, and they could, make it back. So we're still drafting him at 806 is the thing. All this uncertainty, when a guy like Marvin Jones, who's a pretty damn good player with a pretty damn good quarterback, assuming Matthew Stafford's healthy, is available 1 pick later. So, Evil, what are you doing here? And I want to say this could be roster construction because maybe you already have a couple of really good receivers and you say, wow, Deebo Samuel was great down the stretch. I'm looking for a guy down the stretch. Marvin Jones will have a good game. Look, he had a 4-touchdown game last year. Great best ball player, but plays with a pretty good quarterback and a pretty good offense. Which way would you go?
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult decision because Deebo did do well the last 5, 6, 7, 8 games. He got some good double-digit fantasy numbers. I would almost tempted to go with Jones. I can't believe they're the same. They're not the same ADP, are they? Wow, they're right around the same.
Yeah, it's 806 and 810. So Marvin Jones is going 4 picks later.
Yeah, I guess if I'm, obviously if I'm taking Deebo, I'm hoping he's going to be healthy through the second half of the season, and I can use him in the fantasy playoff run. That would be a tempting way to go. But you're dealing with a guy who's injured. Maybe he comes back earlier. Maybe he's not 100%. And if you want a clean player, a non-sexy player, that would be Marvin Jones.
Who scores
that would still be productive. That would still be very productive.
Yeah, still really good touchdown score. I think, for Samuel, Donnie wanted to know if he opens the season on the PUP list, he opens up, that means he misses the first 6 weeks. So right now he's on the PUP list for camp. He can come off that at any time. If in week 1 he's on the PUP list, the official PUP list for in season, then he's going to miss the first 6 games, and then they have a 3-week window to get him back. So he can come back week 7, week 8, week 9. Most of these guys, when this happens, comes back like maybe week 10, and you start seeing them come back, and they tend to work their way back in. So expecting them to show up full speed seems like it rarely happens. I mean, it's possible. So that's the concern for me, and we just won't know that because why Kyle Shanahan's going to be more secretive than ever, and except for what he's telling us right now that Deebo Samuel might be ready week 1.
Crazy.
My sense of it's a trap.
It's a trap. Now Jones also missed 3 games last year at the end of the season. I forget exactly what his injury was.
It was a knee.
So hopefully he's healthy, and he did have some monster games. He's got a ceiling. He's got a high ceiling.
I think that, to me, ideally, maybe this is as easy as say, hey, I'm playing in a redraft. I want a guy down the stretch. Go ahead. I would not talk you out of taking Deebo Samuel because I know what he did. But if you're looking for a guy who, by the way, his goal this year is a 15-touchdown season. It was an ankle injury late last season that put him on IR. And, he's aging a little bit, so I get that. The other issue for me, though, is Marvin Jones plays in an offense where they're going to throw because we know they're going to throw because that's what they do. Their defense is horrible, and they throw the ball out. Matthew Stafford was slinging it last year at a top 5 QB rate. I expect he will because they play from behind a lot. San Francisco's built differently. They play great defense and run the ball. So for me, there's like one receiver at a time. We're talking about Brandon Ayuk right now, who's been pretty impressive. A little talk today about Dante Pettis flashing, finally showing some signs that he's rounding the corner that we thought he was going to round 2 years ago but never did. Kendrick Bourne has been consistent times. They've lost Jalen Hurst. Deebo Samuel's out. It's a bit of a mess there. So I get why you want it, but for me, when everyone is healthy, the passing attack is Kittle and one wide receiver, whoever that wide receiver is. And the other one may show up, right? I mean, like Emmanuel Sanders last year had, that huge game against New Orleans. But it tends to be, for the most part, one receiver at a time in this offense. Could be Kendrick Bourne. I mean, the touchdown scoring threat that he was last year, he would flash at times. So it's just hard for me to buy into the consistency of anyone beyond the running wide receiver 1. So if it's Deebo, I'm great with that. If it was Brandon Ayuk, a guy they love, I'd be great with that too. It's just one at a time for me. So that's probably why I'm not drafting a lot of Deebo. Maybe it'll cost me in redrafts or best balls that I don't have him down the stretch, but I'm willing to take that chance because I don't know where he'll be down the stretch. Jones fractures can be tricky. So your own mileage may vary based on your risk tolerance levels. All right, everybody, we're going to call it a day here. And again, sorry we got a little bit of a late start. I think we made up for it on the tail end here. We'll be back again Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday, 3, Thursday, 8, Friday, 3. And also, hit the subscribe button one more time. It's right below Emil Kadlec. You can see it right there. You will get all the notifications. And feel free to share these videos on your social media, etc. We will be on the website. I've got constant news and notes. The August update draft guide is up and running. Rankings updated based on all the latest information. We're throwing out tons of updates, tons of articles, tons of these videos going up, including some new videos by John Laub, prepping you for the DFS season ahead. The magazines are available both in digital format and for mailing. So you can get those sent to you. The Fantasy Football Pro Forecast 31st edition, the 20th anniversary edition. Wow. Of the Football Diehards magazine. We're getting old, Emil. And we'll roll this right into the flash update. So if you want to go check it out, you haven't seen it yet, go to footballdiehards.com/free trial. And you get a look around, take a little tour of the place for a week or so, and then we'll start hitting you up for money. And when we do, and you decide, wow, this is the best thing ever, use the promo code Diehards when you order to get 15% discount on what's already the best price in the business for the amount of information you get. And that will include this year the My Fantasy GM, our new tool that marries all your roster-specific information with our technology, our rankings, and makes managing your team and winning your league much easier while spending less time doing it. It's pretty fantastic. Emil's done a yeoman's work on that. Connects to all the commissioners out there, all the major commissioners, My Fantasy League, Yahoo, NFL, ESPN, Sleeper, Flea Flicker, and more to come, RT Sports. We're looking at you. So we'll be back again. Have a nice weekend. There's no games, so go to the Flash, go to the August update, read all the news from all the training camp practices. I'm posting around the clock, as always. Check the rankings. Have a good time. We appreciate your presence. We'll talk to you next